Hey everyone, and welcome to The Rational Republican, a podcast where we look at complex issues facing us here in Oregon and around the nation. We'll try to address issues from a nonpartisan perspective and view our disagreements through a lens of respect rather than tribalism or divisiveness. I'm James Ball. This is Nick Perlasky.
Hey listeners, how we doing?
Today's podcast is brought to you by ProLift Garage Doors. ProLift is your one-stop shop for residential and small commercial garage doors, from openers, springs, and rollers to full reinstalls. They offer same-day service on all garage door repairs with no extra charge for evenings or weekends. Serving the greater Portland metro area, call today and set up your free estimate at 503-558-6349 or at proliftdoors.com/Portland. Again, that's 503-558-6349 or proliftdoors.com/Portland. On this episode of the podcast, we have Aeric Estep, who is joining us. Aeric is running for state representative in which district? 37, which is...
Oh, the area.
Westland, right?
Westland, Tualatin.
Westland, Tualatin. Yep. That was the
one after 36, James.
It's a prime number. That's all I got.
They redid all the district lines, so 36 is no longer the 36 that I ran in. But anyway, Aeric and I have an interesting history. We actually went to undergrad together back a million years ago at Corban University. And so we were just talking before the podcast. I remember a very different Aeric than what is sitting with us here today. So I won't go into too much more detail. But Aeric, why don't you take a couple minutes to introduce yourself, who you are, and what got you into politics?
Sure. First off, my name is Aeric, and that's spelled A-E-R-I-C. Everyone needs to know that.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up, childhood was in Southern Oregon, so spent a lot of time on the Rogue River down to Grants Pass, did high school there, and then moved to Salem to go to Corban. That's where my undergrad was with James, and moved up to Portland area to go to grad school. So I've been living in West Linn for almost 9 years now. So my wife and I live in West Linn, and we've been raising 4 boys now for a while.
Wow.
It's a fun house. It's a fun house.
Now you have 2 more boys to raise on this podcast.
Living in West Linn now for 9 years. The full-time job is as a mechanical construction. I'm an account manager, and that means I sell furnaces or air conditioners or whatever, and make sure that those projects go the way I said they would go when I sold them. So that's the
good stuff.
Yeah.
Sales. Fun.
Sales and management.
Sales and management.
Yep.
Cool.
So what's HD37 like? What is it about the district that compelled you to run? What is it about Rachel Prusak that felt there could be better leadership and better representation of the individuals who live in the area? And what was it that made you say, you know what, I think I'm that guy?
That's good. So the district is Westland, Tualatin, a suburb district for sure. There's a lot of people care about their schools in the district. And I've been, like I said, living there for a while. So it's the community I live in. It's the community I love, I care for. Those are where my neighbors are. So the driver was I love Oregon. I love my community, and too many people are leaving Oregon. Too many people are giving up on Oregon because it's not being cared for. And the state needs stewardship and leadership. It needs stewardship in government. And I'm running to be one of those stewards. I'm seeing a lot of people who have been in leadership for a long time, and things are not being done the way they should be done. So let's jump up and try to help.
Honestly, the S word is I feel like very apt. Definitely a good descriptor for kind of what's needed. I asked a family member who is a Democrat. I said, what do you think about the Democratic primary for governor coming up? Especially if Nick, we're going to find out. We're recording this Wednesday, the 16th.
Yep.
So we're going to find out tomorrow morning if Nick Kristof is going to be on the ballot. By the time listeners, you're listening to this, you will know. But I asked her, if there is no Nick, because that was her first choice. Are you Team Tina? Are you Team Tobias? Do you just not vote in the Democratic primary? And she said, I want to vote for the individual who is going to be able to get the most amount of work done while bringing the most amount of Oregonians together. And she said there's a lot of very, left and far left individuals in Portland and in offices in Portland. And then there's a lot of right and far right individuals in Malheur and Harney counties and, in the agriculture space, things like that. And she said, I get that it's hard. I get that it's a big bridge that you're going to have to build. But she said, there's just so many people I feel like who are just really preaching to their own side and not focused on what the task at hand is or how to represent the people that you're claiming to try to represent. And it was such a refreshing take on what the value of an elected official is and what you should really kind of have as your North Star. And so, you didn't just say it's like, I want to run because I want more businesses to come to Oregon, or I want, less sales tax, something like that. You use the S word, and I appreciate that, though we don't offer endorsements on this podcast. So nobody can construe that. I don't know if you're being primaried by anybody or whatever, but that doesn't count as an endorsement.
That's funny.
Well, your district, so I don't know how the lines are drawn now, but before Prusak, it was held by Julie Parrish, and prior to that was Scott Bruin. So there have been Republicans.
Both friends of the pod.
They've both been on the podcast. Have we had
Scott? Has not.
Scott has not. We need to get him on, though.
He's a personal friend, but Julie Parrish has been on the podcast.
We play basketball with Scott.
Play basketball.
Yeah. So
he's
anyway,
very good at basketball.
I know, right? Like, gosh. Anyway, unreasonably good for pickup basketball on Sunday mornings. Digressing slightly. But this is a seat that has been held by Republicans in the very recent past. So I don't know. You think is this a reasonable thing? I knew when I ran for 36, it was not reasonable. There was not really an attempt. I mean, there was an attempt, but it was it was not. But so what do you think, like demographic wise, how this is going to play out?
Yeah, I do think it's reasonable. Otherwise,
that's the right answer.
Yeah. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it. It takes a lot of time to engage it, and like I said, there's 4 boys in my house. But I do think it's reasonable. But I do think it requires someone like a Julie Parrish who exudes an independence. It's not just like Nick, you were talking about the different sides and being more extreme on either side. I think it takes someone that's going to be independent and say, yeah, I'm going to engage these questions as they come and decide, is this a good answer? Is this a bad answer? Not just what's the party line? Let's go that direction. And I think that's what was appealing to the people who've held the seat in the past from the Republican side of the aisle. And I think I fit that bill as well. It's more of let's steward. Let's not just the district, but the state well. And sometimes the answers to those questions may lean on one side of the aisle or the other side of the aisle, and being able to evaluate that every time rather than just, nope, got my talking points. Here we go. So yeah, I think it's a doable thing. And I think I fit in the demographic that would make that appropriate.
Cool. What was it, if I can ask, that so obviously you're running and you're a candidate now and you're trying to make HD37, make the world safe for democracy kind of a thing. What was it that drew you to politics in the first place? Was there, was it like the George Bush presidential race? Was it like Vicatia here in Oregon? Was it a smaller, a more local matter, a city councilor that you liked or something like that? What was the kind of the initial spark that got you interested in running for office, in being a public servant?
Yeah, I was finishing up grad school in 2016, and I better pay attention to the news. I better figure out what's going on. So that was the first cycle. I was very invested, very involved, and out of that, it was I want to go love my city. I want to go love my neighbors. I can do that across the street on an individual basis, but I want to use my time, talent, treasures to invest. So I requested to be appointed to some city boards in 2016. I was part of the library board. I was then appointed to the Library District Advisory Committee. That's at the county level. And just loved serving. You show up in that room, and just by nature of being there, there's influence. There's people are going, great, someone can serve. This is awesome. So I've just really enjoyed that. I've since been on I'm on Economic Development Commission for the county and things like that. But it's just... I love my neighbors. I want to help my neighbors, and I want to seek the welfare of the city. And I can do that by more than just walking across the street and meeting a neighbor. things need to be guided. Things need to be stewarded. We've used that word a couple times. And that's where that kind of love and realization that you said, make the world safe for democracy. That's the cool thing.
Do it.
Indeed. That's the cool thing about democracy, though. If you show up, you can help. Mm-hmm. That's not a given everywhere. We know that. And it's just cool if you show up and you help and realize, wow, something's happening. I did something good. It gives you encouragement to keep doing more and see how helpful can I be? Let's not stop at just the small thing.
Yeah. As somebody who primarily gets his news from Twitter, and you just curate a list of individuals who are kind of in the know and that you like seeing their takes on stuff, the amount of, armchair quarterbacking from, folks who are just like 140 characters in a cell phone versus actually engaging in the public policy process. And I mean, you're absolutely right. Decisions are made by those who show up, and everybody, I want to run for president. I want to run for Senate. I want to run for governor. I want to run for Congress. Everybody has these lofty ambitions because it's the people that you see on TV every day. And,
right.
The stuff that you read about in Oregonian or whatever, where the truth is 50%, 80%, 90% of the decisions that affect a person on a daily basis are made by Clackamas County Library Boards, or I sit on the Multnomah County Citizens Budget Advisory Committee. And it's a room full of 6 people that's like pulling teeth to try to get people in there. But now all of a sudden it's like, here's our budget. Here's what it is that we're looking to do. Is this how we should have a priority? And yeah, if you show up to something like that and just go, we talked before the podcast, you're working your way through Parks and Rec. If you just go full Leslie Knope and just dive into something that might not get a lot of attention or might not get a lot of ink in the newspaper or whatever, but it matters to a lot of individuals. And if you have the ability to make it better, that's the type of work that can go on and get noticed and lead to, some of those bigger things that, everybody just watches TV and tries to talk about.
Yeah.
My source of influence, what I've tried to do with my time and energy is through the Republican Party. And, I'm currently running for a nonpartisan seat, and I've had people tell me, you should drop the Republican brand, just change your registration to non-affiliated voters. And I've resisted that for a major reason for that is being able to show up. If I drop my registration, I'm no longer invited to Washington County GOP meetings. I'm no longer eligible to be a delegate to the Oregon Republican Party. These are things where I feel like I've had a real measurable difference over the past, 4 or 5 years. And I'm not willing to give that seat at the table up quite so easily. So I appreciate just being able to.
I was playing basketball with Scott Brune 2 Sundays ago, and I actually fed him your line with attribution. I told him it was yours, but we had this conversation once.
I probably stole it from someone else.
Maybe you did. Who knows?
Stole it from Scott.
At least, it's just working its way back around. But your line, James, was I don't want to abandon the ship to the pirates. And Eric, I don't know your position on Trump or January 6th or anything like that, but James and I have been pretty vocal as anti-Trump individuals. That's kind of not our brand of what republicanism is or whatever, but we don't like the idea of a bunch of red hats showing up at party meetings and trying to outlaw gay marriage and trying to bring us back to the Stone Age on this, that, the other thing. And we call ourselves the Rational Republican partly because we like alliteration, partly because we like the idea of trying to move the party in a more sane, sensible direction where we're focused on getting good outcomes and being good stewards of our state and our community, and doing so by getting businesses to show up and everything like that.
One of the comments on that is it doesn't really matter what your stance is on abortion or gay marriage, because that tends to be like the 2 hot button issues that everyone talks about within the Republican Party. It doesn't matter because in the state of Oregon, neither of those things is changing. Like, there is no sentiment at all to change either of those things. So, my stance has been, hey, let's get on board and try to make changes in other areas where we actually have some influence rather than these 2 things that, if longtime listeners of the podcast will know where I stand on these, but
God bless you if you're a long time listener of the podcast.
Whether or not, regardless of what your position is, we can't make any changes, those of us on the right-hand side of the aisle. So let's just move on and find something else and keep your views to yourself. And that's probably not a good way to say it, but
sorry, we'll fix it in post.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking about just the sentiment people have had with you, James, about, well, why don't you drop it? Or I've had people say, why don't you just join the Democrat Party or the Democratic Party? And one, I think we owe it to the state to have two strong parties. We owe it to the state to have good debate about an issue. And I've talked with people like, there is no good debate right now because there's only one side. And here we go. We've decided this. Well, we want to talk about it. We want to debate about it. It doesn't matter. We're going this way. And me running is a result of this isn't going well. And we need strong advocacy on either side of a question. And will that lead to more compromise? Yeah. And it probably leads to better bipartisan results of whatever bill, whatever posture people in the state are taking.
That was one of the things that Christine Drazan and the Republicans in the House did this last session and the session before, like the last 3 sessions, I think, was use kind of obscure tactics to force the Democrats to come to the table and actually have a conversation about things, whether that was the walkout, which is kind of the famous one, or just making every bill be read out loud, which ground everything to a halt. I think there was one other one, but it's slipping my mind, of things that she specifically did that put such a pressure on the Democratic agenda that they really had no choice but to come to the table and negotiate despite being in the super minority. So I think that was a fantastic thing. And unfortunately, when you win, you won't get to serve with her because she'll be governor at the time. So
3D chess Christine, they all call it.
Yes.
I mentioned God bless any listeners who are longtime listeners a couple of seconds ago. And I actually, it kind of reminded me of a question I wanted to ask. You yourself also have a podcast that I understand is of a religious ilk. I was wondering, what does your faith do? What does your work in any kind of a faith-based organization or with individuals in that realm? How does that kind of inform your desire to run and desire to serve?
No, that's a great question. Scott Reevely and I host the City on a Hill podcast, which is trying to get at some of these political things within a Christian context and piece apart or pull apart Christianity and politics and go, hey, keep these things distinct. And our desire in that podcast would be to have people informed by their Christianity first, not by their politics first. Because that's been a problem.
Turns
out there's lots of topics. There's lots of episodes. But yeah, it goes a long way in informing even why I want to do this at all. Like my faith informs me that, hey, you're supposed to love your neighbor. That's not just that sounds good, so I keep saying it. That's a huge part of what it means to belong to Jesus, really. So love your neighbor. That's where I get the stewardship language. That's where I get the you should care about the city you live in. You should care about the community you live in. And the care doesn't just sit in your mind and you go, yeah, I care. No, care has action to it. So a lot of the reason I have for wanting to serve at all is attached to my faith, attached to my Christianity.
Now, aren't Portlanders specifically just a bunch of Satanist heathens? Like, wasn't this like the least religious city in the country or something? Like, I thought I saw a poll sometime before I moved here that was just like the lowest level of church attendance. And I obviously, don't get me wrong, I love an excuse to try to crack a joke, but I on a serious point, there is a you have been able to kind of incorporate your faith into the work that you do, into the life that you lead, and now into the race that you're running, and have not faced any kind of Portland heatheny. We can never vote for this person because he is a lover of Jesus and he is a follower of religion.
Was that a question?
Yes, I mean,
have you run into that?
I have not. Yeah. No, I have not. I have not run into that yet. The day is still young, but I have not run into that, and I'm ready for that, and also ready to have a conversation. I announced the race and just had people reaching out on Facebook or something. Hey, what's your view on this? Let's talk about it. I'm not going to, let's not do the text game. Let's not do the talk on Facebook game. I'm willing to talk about things and sure, we may disagree about things, but that doesn't mean we need to be disagreeable. And I think one of the things I'm most excited about in running it all is that I get to meet neighbors, and now I have an even better excuse to meet neighbors. So it's not quite a bring it on thing, but I'm excited to meet people and see where they're coming from, and know that I have no desire to be disagreeable in interacting, and we can talk about things, which is cool.
So one of the things, I've been listening to your podcast. I don't know that I've listened to all of them, sorry, but
I've listened to all yours, James.
Jimbo, come on.
I've been going through The Path to Power, which is the biography of Lyndon Johnson, and that is a long audiobook. So
Have you done Masters of the Senate yet?
No.
That's the first.
That's the second. This is the first. This is the first one. It's like a 30.
Oh, good.
It's like a 30-hour book, and there's like 9 of them. But anyway,
it's incredible.
So I've been behind on my podcasting because I've been listening to this book on tape. Anyway, but you had a really interesting point. So Eric and I went to Bible college together back a million years ago, and
we're really not that old, folks. I just want them to know.
I graduated in 2006, so it feels like a long time ago. Mm-hmm. That was anyway. You had a really interesting series of episodes about the Revolutionary War that I thought was fascinating, because one of the things that we got taught in Bible college was the separation of church and state. It was part of our Baptist heritage class.
Mm-hmm.
This was one of the things that you were taught at Bible school, was separation, that church and state should be separate. And I had always thought the Revolutionary War, at least just in my mind, was in violation of the commandment to obey the authority placed over you. I was like, this seems to be like, it wasn't really a Christian movement, but the Christian Puritan culture that we live in always kind of accepts that, and that's our beginning. And so you're throughout the course of those podcasts kind of solidified and really kind of fleshed out what I had in my mind anyway, that if those people had followed the Bible, they probably wouldn't have ever rebelled, and we'd still be part of England.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just very interesting. And
well, it's super fascinating because it's so easy to just keep things simple. And that's such a complex story. And there's the loyalists, and then the people that go, we don't want any part of this, we're going to move to Canada. Mm-hmm. You have all that stuff going on, and there's not just one perspective of the American Revolution. And we've probably said it 100 times on our podcast. Super thankful to live in America. Yes. Super thankful to belong to this place.
I forget if it was you or your co-host said, just because we benefit from something doesn't mean that it was biblical or correct to be done at the time. And so no question that we all benefit from the Revolutionary War and the fact that America is separate from England. However, that doesn't mean that it was the right thing to do at the time. Which is just kind of an interesting,
in the
interesting take.
The conflict there is the Romans 13 conflict, which of all the verses I've been talking about a lot the last 2 years is Romans 13. Submit to the governing authorities, and that's the rub there. Well, what about the American Revolution?
Right.
And you use that as a justification to go, now I don't have to do anything now because we didn't do it then, so now I don't like it. And I've been saying, no, that's still applicable. My faith says so because we listen to this book. And also, because of the system we live in, I can go, you know what? I don't like the way the decisions have been going in the last 2 years, so I can participate in the government. I can run for office. I can submit to the governing authorities and then say, hey, I'd like to be part of the governing authority.
That's kind of how I view the mask mandate, is like, I will follow the authority, but I'll still complain about it. And I'll still make every effort to change the policy, but as long as it is the policy, I'll submit.
Romans 13 was like the prequel to millions of Yelp reviews about just complaining, angry, or whatever. I was like, I can't believe this person said this.
Well, I had someone, when I was fighting with the Multnomah County Republicans almost a year ago. Wow. Someone made the comment. It's like, oh, I'll bet in the Revolutionary War you would have been on the side of King George. And I thought about it, and it's like, I'm not sure. I don't like. I know you're using that as an insult, that I wouldn't have been on the side of George Washington and the Patriots, but I don't like. Just I'm glad I don't have to make that decision in real time. Right. I'm glad I get to look back from however many,
And just
250
benefit.
years. Yeah, and just benefit. And we can speculate about whether or not it was a good thing to do or whether it was biblical or not. But at the same time, just be like, oh, well, it's here. This is it. So
that's interesting. I've always, and I say this as an individual who was confirmed into the Catholic Church, who grew up going to church every Sunday, but who is an individual. I don't consider myself particularly of faith. I couldn't quote Bible verses with y'all. I don't know. I know the words to many of the hymns of Catholic songs, but I also mess up the Nicene Creed because they changed it a couple of years ago, and I still just know the old version. So we'll figure that out another time. But it's interesting that you guys bring up the American Revolution, because I've always had a belief, I guess a somewhat latent belief, again, as a person who is not I'm not an atheist or anything, but I don't go to church every Sunday. But I've always had a belief that the American Revolution was at least in some part of the divine. There was some amount of a divine intervention to get that collection of people. I try to avoid men, but it was primarily men at the time, together on the same earth, on the same part of the earth, at the same period in history, with the same set of ideas of wanting liberty and individualism and freedom, and willing in large part to risk their own lives, and for a lot of the folks that fought in the Revolutionary War to actually give their lives for the idea of, we need to have a country founded by reason and debate and democracy and ideas, rather than just pretty much every other country was just had some monarchic leader, theocratic leader, kind of something like that. And, a bunch of guys got together in Philadelphia in 1775 and were just like, you know what, this is maybe maybe there's a better way. We can kind of argue about this. And it led to what the both of you guys are doing now. You guys are both running for, I'm just sitting here drinking my cocktail, but you guys are actually both have skin in the game, the Roosevelt man in the arena kind of thing. But, that's interesting. You've sold me, and listeners, I hope Eric has sold you as well. I got to go back and listen to these episodes of your podcast and talk about the Revolutionary War. And was it biblical? Was it appropriate? And it's just kind of get the answers here. We've got the answers in a whole different podcast.
So I would caveat that to say that throughout history, God has used sinful behavior and sinful people to the glory of him and to the benefit of society. And I don't think that just because I think it's okay to say, yes, there was a divine hand in the founding fathers and these extraordinary men all in the same place at the same time with the same ideas to build something. Because I think that on the whole, America has been a benefit to the world, to, basically any way you slice it. America's existence has benefited the world. And so despite this one act that I think I just thought it was very interesting to talk about, may or may not have been sinful, ends up being a very positive result for the entire world when it comes to quality of life or freedom or all these other things. So it doesn't need to be either or. It can be both.
It can be so. But now I wonder, and this is a whole separate. We started off at HD37, and
this
now
is fantastic. We're just rabbit trailing. It's great.
Yeah, exactly. But
I wanted to ask you about it on air. So blame me.
But that is a utilitarian argument, and I wonder, like, people who are not fans, which is definitely not, I love country music, but people who are not fans always kind of dunk on country music for being really sad. And there's a part of me that wonders, is it worth it for Keith Urban to go through like several really bad breakups and, see all these people go like abuse drugs and whatever to create art that is undeniably engaging and good, and, you sell out shows and all kinds of good stuff. Is it worth it for these individuals to go through heartbreak and loss and, torture themselves with substance abuse and whatever? And on the one hand, it's just like, well, if Kanye West weren't kind of a crazy person, we wouldn't have like The Dropout, College Dropout, which is like that's a really great album. And like, There's a lot of people whose lives are better because they got to listen to College Dropout like a whole bunch of times. But is it worth it for somebody to go through something like that? And now I feel like that's a little bit the argument that you're making is something may have been sinful, something may have been objectively wrong or objectively not in accordance with biblical teachings or what we've come to understand, but because there's benefit from it, it ends up being a net positive overall. And I wonder if there's other things to which that might be applied, because I hate making the slippery slope argument, but it does kind of end up being a slippery slope. It's just like, well, this part is wrong, but it led to good stuff, so it ends up being.
Well,
okay.
I think when you're looking at history, I don't think it matters quite as much. Like the thing happened, you can debate whether or not it was a good thing or ended up being a good thing or contributed to good things, but it happened. You can't really debate whether or not it happened. So,
well, if you're a Trump supporter, you could. So we can open that can of worms.
Well, and my view of theology says, yeah, there's definitely brokenness in the world all around us. It's easy to see that, but everything is not utterly broken. Mm-hmm. So there's necessarily the theological term is common grace. Common grace is occurring in the world because God is still good, and things happen despite brokenness. So one that allows us to look back at history and go, this good thing happened despite something that may have been broken. And also I can engage now despite things being broken. And the ability to engage has the possibility of actually enacting good. I can actually do something, and there's something that can result from it that's beneficial. So that allows for complexity, that allows for engagement, that allows for something's worth doing, something's worth trying to steward. So
nice, bringing it back, bringing it all the way back. I love it. Oh my God! All right, so let me ask on I don't even know, whatever, January 3rd or whenever inauguration is next year, Representative Estep.
Yep.
Representative Estep is sworn in as the duly elected official to represent the people of House District 37. What's thing one on the docket? What's something you're going to go to bat for? What's something you're looking to do? Who are the folks in Salem you're looking to try to make friends with and build relationships with to get things moving on down the line? What do we got?
I would say try to make friends with everyone in Salem. All right. For sure. And I want to engage the things that probably everyone is looking at and going, why isn't this fixed? One of those is we have neighbors that live on the streets right now, and it's growing. It's not shrinking, it's growing. How can we engage that? I think that should be one of the priorities of the legislature until it's figured out. Evaluate money's going this direction. Is this money helping? Yes, no. What programs are actually working? Let's funnel the money where the programs are working, not where they're not working. That's the big one. I would love to see schools be transparent institutions. Parents want to be able to speak to schools, and I got 4 kids at home, and thinking about delegating authority to a school and saying, hey, you have full-time work level responsibility parenting this kid alongside me. If I don't get a two-way street with that communication, I'm going to be really frustrated. And I hear a lot of frustrated parents. Yeah. And engaging that and saying, hey, this institutions are an important part of what it means to be a citizen, because institutions form you, they create who you are, they change you. And if these institutions are going to change our kids, you want to be able to see what's the plan, where's the direction, where's the intended end. So transparent institutions with schools, and then ramping up public safety as well. One of the primary purposes of government is public justice. That's why there's justice systems. And funding those appropriately. I was just listening to an Oregon podcast about, I think they were interviewing one of the Portland commissioners, and he says, we don't have enough police officers to respond to the calls we're getting. Mm-hmm. That's a failure of government. That's one of the primary things the government does. So emphasizing the appropriate funding, that should also be a transparent institution for sure, because it has such a large role in society. And then encouraging that. If you have a bunch of elected leaders, what's the word? If a bunch of elected leaders just downplaying police, downplaying that aspect of government, it's not going to go well. So if you're an elected leader, emphasizing the things the government should do and expecting them to do it excellently. That's the kind of posture I would take in.
Cool. One of the statistics I like to cite is that Willamette Week put an article out last summer, and in the 12 months between, I think, June 2020 and June 2021, 1 in 1,000 Black residents of Portland were victims of homicide, were killed in the streets. 1 in 1,000, 0.1%. And there was basically no response to that. We're going to tear down the whole country, burn everything to the ground over George Floyd being killed by a police officer. And by no means is that an acceptable thing for a police officer to do.
We did a whole episode on it.
And then a couple months later, for an entire year, Black people are getting killed in the streets who are just as dead as George Floyd. And part of the reason is lack of police. I mean, homicides have gone through the roof in the city of Portland, specifically in Portland. That's where I have my statistics from. And a lot of that is lack of police. It's amazing how the fallout from the riots and all the unrest and the failure of government and the failure of leadership within the Portland metro area has resulted in harm, death, destruction coming to the Black community, which, we're going to turn up the volume on all our wokeness, and we're all going to put, our pronouns in our bio, and we're all going to say a prayer to the Native Americans before we start our meetings. But Black people are dying on the streets, and they're signaling that they are just for this community and trying to be these, I hate to say the word woke, but that seems to be the thing that describes them the best. But they're trying to support these communities, or at least they're saying they're supporting these communities, and then their actions are the exact opposite. And I would very much like to see someone such as yourself get in power and start supporting our not even supporting the police department, but prioritizing health and safety and public service and those sorts of things. So,
when prioritizing the protection of people who have dignity and worth and value, those are neighbors.
Yes.
The 1 in 1,000, those are neighbors that have died, and that's unacceptable.
Yeah, agreed.
That's another good word, neighbors. I'm going to take that away from this guy. You've said that several times so far tonight, referring to, in this case, Black individuals in the city of Portland who have been shot and killed. Earlier, at individuals who are homeless or houseless, or however you'd like to define that. But that's, at the end of the day, it's a true story. These are all our neighbors, and we're trying to, if we want a better Portland, we want a better Portland for everybody. Better Westland in your case.
Oregon.
Better Oregon. Yeah, we all want that.
Yeah,
exactly. So you were at the Lincoln Day dinner a couple days ago. Yeah. How'd that go?
It went well. I'm laughing because that was my first kind of political fundraiser thing. And Leslie, my wife, and I were sitting there, and Senator Kennemer was the MC. He said, "All right, if you're a candidate, come on up. You got 1 minute." And Leslie looked at me and said, "That means you." Oh, shoot. I need a speech right now. So I should have expected that, but I didn't expect that. And so it was a surprise, but it was good. And it was good to meet people. And
I've been in those situations before where somebody's like, "Hey, come up and say something." And I was like, "Oh, well, okay. I mean, I am
glad you asked.
Riff for a little bit."
Needless to say, I got home and opened up a note, and all right, we're going to start making some notes so we know how to do this in the future.
That's cool. Yeah. The last run-in I had with the Proud Boys was at a Clackamas County event. I think at that same venue. They're working on infiltrating the Clackamas County GOP, and I have been, I don't know. I don't live in Clackamas County, so I don't see them much, but had some interesting conversations I'll tell you about after the podcast.
Tune in next time, listeners.
No, we're not. That's not going on.
Jimbo getting almost beat up by the Proud Boys.
Threatens.
It was threatened.
Anyway, so campaign-wise, what are your plans for the next? What do we got today? This is February, so 7 months.
Can I ask? Have you drawn a primary opponent? Is there somebody else that you're running against in the Republican primary?
I've not seen any. Nope.
Okay,
it's just me right now.
All right,
let's leave it that way. That sounds great.
There we go. Knock wood. Not that you would not, I'm sure, mop the floor with somebody in a primary because you're very adept and you've now, spoken at a Lincoln Day dinner. You're ready to go. Everything.
And I've been on the Rational Republican podcast.
So we've not had anybody else. Anybody else who's in a primary in a House seat this cycle. I don't think we've ever had anybody in a primary in a House seat.
I'd have to think about it, but I don't think so.
Yeah, this is a first. Look, we're breaking ground today all over.
I feel distinguished.
Distinguished gentleman. Yes. What's it look like between now and November? How are you going to win this thing?
Yeah. So, as James knows, campaigning is raising money and meeting voters. The goal is to have more people vote for you than the other person at the end of the day.
Guys, I think he's solved it. That's what we got to do. We got to get more voters.
Solve for X. Yeah, right.
James is like, oh shoot, is that what I'm supposed to do?
This is what I did wrong.
Oh no.
Sorry, carry on.
It's all good. So we've started that. We're planning on knocking on doors, meeting neighbors, attending events. Like I said, I get an excuse to meet people, which is just fantastic. So we're planning on walking the neighborhoods and seeing how many doors we can knock on before Election Day.
My plan was to knock on every door in my district when I ran for 36. And then COVID happened in March, right in the middle of my... so I was going to spend all summer knocking doors, and then that kind of
probably didn't happen.
It did not happen. I was like, this is a fairly Democratic district. I'm pretty sure nobody here wants me knocking on their door.
Exactly.
They're going to do more harm than good. So anyway,
oh goodness gracious,
more power to you. That's the door knocking is a fun one. So enjoy that.
I did that with you one time for like 2 hours in HD36, and it's a slog. It's a great way to end up meeting folks, but like you just have to have the mindset of like, you're really excited to go out and do this because it was raining that day, and it's just like you gotta.
It's Oregon.
Gotta get hype.
It's always raining.
That's true. Yeah, right. That's the truth.
Well, it's like, I kind of enjoyed it because you do get to talk to people and have different experiences and different conversations, and a lot of people will just take your literature and okay, thanks, see you later. But every once in a while, when you get someone to actually interact with you, and you can reach out and talk to people who probably disagree with you. And that's, one of the things that I've done throughout my political life, I guess, is seeking out people who disagree with me. Not necessarily on this podcast. We get a lot of Republicans on
Dr.
here.
Lisa.
We did have a couple, but just seeking out those conversations, and you run into a lot of that, knocking doors because you get everybody.
Right.
So good luck to you. Well,
we're normally like so optimistic and like, now here's the thing or whatever. And it's just like, well,
I hope that's
fine. No. I think
that works out for you.
I think you'll do great. I didn't mean to be a downer.
No, it is. To your point from earlier, it's a way to meet your neighbors. You can look at it as campaigning, or you can look at it as meeting your neighbors. And a lot of, we'll go and ask our neighbors for an egg because we have something to bake or something, whatever, or just, our neighbor. And I say this for our listeners and we only have listeners today because I was a jerk and we didn't put the YouTube stuff up. But our neighbors right across in the duplex across from us, my wife had my Valentine's Day gift delivered a couple of days ago, and some guy came up on the porch and stole it. What? And we're just like, "Are you serious?" And then the neighbor was
Happy Valentine's Day.
Yeah, right. Happy Valentine's Day to me. And but the neighbor was just like, "Did you guys have a package?" And we're like, "Yes." And she was like, "Okay, I saw the guy do it. I was on a work call. I said, 'Hang on, I'll be right back.' Actually came out, confronted the guy, and was just like, 'Is that your package?' And he was just like, 'Yeah, it's mine. Tell these people that I came by and picked it up.' And she was like, 'No, that's their package. You need to put that down.' And he straight up shoved her. He actually shoved our neighbor, whose name I did not know until we met her and she told us this story. And that's one of those things where it's just like, I wouldn't have known this person from Adam in a lineup of any 5 Portlanders, even though she lives 9 feet from me. I mean, I'm looking into their kitchen as I speak right now. But she was willing to like stop her job, get off of her phone call, come out and confront somebody and be assaulted for me for her neighbor, because that's what neighbors do for each
Your
other.
neighbor is awesome.
She is. That's
awesome.
I hope she moves to Westland soon and she can go vote for you and you can go meet her too. But I guess this can be my positive spin. Jim and I were just like, oh well, good luck with the block walking.
That's
or whatever.
not what I mean.
But like you get a chance to go out and meet your neighbors, and you get. In some instances, they're willing to get assaulted for you, even if they don't know who you are. Just the fact that you live right next to them, and so this is you, and you get to go hear their ideas, and
Right.
hopefully they end up voting for you.
Well, and that's key, getting to what are the members of your district concerned about? Like that matters.
Yeah.
If you're going to be a representative for them, I want to know what people care about. I want to know. I have some pretty good ideas what they care about, but there's going to be a lot of nuance. So no, we actually care about X, which is a little bit different than you thought. Okay, I want to know that. That's helpful.
I was one of the things that I on my block walks ended up talking to a guy about gun control, and on one hand, he did not trust Trump as far as he could throw him, and on the other hand, he wanted all gun legislation to be handled at the federal government. I was like, do you not see what's like A to B here? Like, you want this Trump, who you hate and do not trust at all, controlling all of your guns. Okay. I mean,
good luck.
Great. All right. Anyway, we are getting about to the end of the podcast. So one of the things we like to do at the end of the podcast, and we did give you a heads up. He commented that we a lot of times do not.
5 seconds, folks.
We did not with Representative Patrick. Sorry about that.
Sorry,
Patrick
Mr. Sheehan. One of the things we like to ask our guests is who their favorite Republican is, if you have one.
I'll go modern day rather than go the original and Lincoln or something like that. I'll say Senator Ben Sasse. I'm a fan of that guy, and watching him just stand, and I mean, he's given a few speeches on the Senate floor when many, especially in his party, did not agree with him, and just that courage and that willingness to do the right thing, even if it's not going to be applauded. I like that a lot. I'm encouraged by that. And he also wrote probably my favorite parenting book. He wrote a book called The Vanishing American Adult. I don't think he marketed it as a parenting book, but I read it as a parenting book. It's just super helpful, and I'd recommend it to readers or listeners as well. Just a really good, how should we ponder how we're going to train our kids to think and act in this world, because it's changing quickly, and you gotta respond accordingly. So again, I got 4 kids at home, and like this book is awesome.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Wasn't Ben Sasse your favorite Republican, or
I'm sure I said
say
Jack Kemp probably, if I know me.
Someone said.
Somebody
Ben
has
Sasse.
said Ben Sasse, and it gives me license. My 2 favorite Ben Sasse facts. First off, he taught at the University of Texas, which is my alma mater. Go Longhorns. Always going to be a good dude. But the second cool thing is he goes back to Nebraska and he drives Uber on weekends. Yeah. And you were talking about the same thing about it, having a way to have a conversation with your neighbor.
Yep.
And if he gets to go and like listen to Lil Nas X because a 19-year-old requested or whatever, and gets to get drunk in his back seat, but he just gets to say, what do you think of the job that the federal government is doing? And probably 9 times out of 10, the person doesn't know that he is a United States senator. And so they're just going to give their unfiltered opinion. He's just going to sit there and learn and feel and hear what his neighbors think. And if I say this as somebody who did drive Uber for 6 months, something like that, there is no better way to get a handle on just a quick snippet into the lives of, any average everyday American than giving them a ride somewhere. That's a really great way to do constituent outreach and, voter engagement and everything like that. So I appreciate your thoughts of Ben Sasse. Go Horns.
All right. Well, with that, Eric, thank you again so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah.
And listeners, we will talk to you next time. Thanks for listening to the Rational Republican podcast. Your hosts are James Ball and Nick Perlosky. The show today is brought to you by ProLift Garage Doors of Portland, serving the greater Portland metro area for all your garage door installation and repair needs. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, you can email us at james@jamesaball.com or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. You can find our episodes at jamesaball.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you find your podcasts.